Hello everybody and welcome back to ChessDiagnostic. So today I'm going to cover some opening traps, and there was a comment that was left on another video asking how to avoid losing in the opening. So I thought this would be an interesting thing to do, so I found 3 games, one by an 1800, one by a 1900, and one by a 2100, where they basically make mistakes in the opening that are really obvious if you know the 3 main opening tasks, which are to develop all your minor pieces, castle, and connect your rooks. And normally you do that by developing your queen, or at least getting all the pieces out of the way somehow. So let's see this first game. I'm not going to dwell too much on any individual move, but let's just try to get the point here. So we start with this game against an 1800 that was played yesterday. All these games were. So this is e4, c5, and I'm black in this position. You could see that white is developing correctly in the Sicilian Con. So I talk about in another video where I normally play the Sicilian Con, and I've had some trouble against the Maroczy bind where white develops and doesn't develop the queen side first, and that's actually the best method to play, but it's still solid for black too, but it's a little cramped. But you could see in this position, white plays knight to c3, and I get queen to c7. So it looks rather innocuous from black's side. He's just made some pawn moves and a queen move, but it can develop very furiously if white decides to develop normally, if he doesn't necessarily know a line or analyzes it deeply. So let's see what happens. So develops the queen side, and now he could castle queenside, but it's still risky after bishop to b4. And now, after knight to f6, I'm putting a lot of pressure on the center. So it looks like the best move would be something like bishop back or knight back. But I want to point out how you could arrive at the correct move without knowing any line. So the obvious threat is knight takes e4 and then bishop takes. And the reason for that is that if the knight takes and the queen takes, and I take here a check and the pawn takes, then I get this fork of the king and the rook. So you need to see that main threat in order to make the correct move. So even something like f3 would be fine, although I could attack the center even more with d5 at that point. But white here makes the move a3. So this move doesn't really do anything to help his position. And I was going to take on c3 anyway. So I take, and then after knight takes, I win a pawn, and now if the queen takes, I would get a check of the king and the rook, winning material. So already from the opening, he's made this error, and it's not because he didn't know the line, and this is the point I want to make. It's because he didn't analyze my threats. So that's the key underlying problem with thinking that you lost in the opening. He didn't lose in the opening, he lost because he didn't analyze my threats. So let's see what happens. The reason I chose this game is because it's a rather ridiculous example of not following the basic ideas in the opening. So he tries to keep this pawn, which allows me to check, and now I go for the rather dubious line, but in this game, it turned out to be correct. I checked the king. And now, either he has to step into a discovered check, or push himself further into the open, which is what he does. And I figured after b6, I would have this bishop check, and I would get some kind of material win, or at least a mate. So let's see what white does. Alright, so attacks the queen, and looks like he's going to win a knight. But the key feature of the knight back is that it removes a defender from the center, and namely a defender of this open king. So after bishop check and queen check, there's really no good moves, although f4 would be the best. After knight to e4, really the only defense is for the king to step into a discovered check. Again, a very hard to find and problematic defense for white. So, of course, if he had time to analyze it, he'd figure out these moves, although it's still one for black at this point. So after bishop to f4, I get that check in. He tries to hang on to that bishop, but after the king back, there's a mate in 2 after here, and then takes. So obviously this is a pretty ridiculous example with a lot of mistakes, but it's not an opening error from this game. All right, so let's go back, or let's go to the next position, I guess. So this is a pretty funny example of a game. This is almost a 2000 player. So in this game, I just go for the Caro-Kann. I think it's the Botvinnik attack where I play c4. And he just decides to develop his queen. So you really don't want to use just the queen or a rook or some heavy piece to go against another player's whole army. And this is not an opening line issue again. This is an issue of him not following the correct strategy in the opening. Any move would have been better than queen to b6, bringing the bishop out, playing e6, bringing the knight out, even fianchettoing the bishop, at least just starting to develop your army to keep parity with mine, because I'm going to develop as quickly as I can. And, you know, I just want to make a point. I rarely lose in the opening. If I lose, it's because I blunder either in the middle game. Normally, from the analysis of my own games, I've been blundering in the end game or in the middle game to end game transition, which can be pretty frustrating because it's a little harder to figure out exactly where you went wrong. But in the opening, it's pretty straightforward. So let's see what happens here. Knight to f6. Okay. So I play c5. And now the queen really should go back and not allow itself to be attacked by my pieces. But he plays queen to b6 or queen to b4 check. And now I don't hit it with the bishop because I don't want to lose this pawn. I just play knight to c3, and the knight could have came in, but the problem for black now is that he really should be looking to his own queen's safety. Instead, we see b6. All right, so pawn moves, queen moves. After a3 and b4, the game's over. Black resigned because the queen's trapped. A perfect illustration of how you lose in the opening if you just don't develop and you try to use one piece to attack your opponent. All right, so let's go to the last game here. And this was against a 2100 player, and we see again the same kind of thing. So I'm black here, and again, I don't know Hungarian opening. I don't know any of these lines. There's no memorization or anything. I just play standard moves, developing. So let's see. All right, already we see a3. What the hell? That doesn't make any sense. He should have played knight to f3 and then castled. That would have solved this whole game, basically. All right, so I castle, and then we see c5, c4. All right, attack in the center makes sense. I just bolster my own center, and then he chases my bishop back. Another pawn move, and if you look at this list, it's all pawn moves, right? So I play my knight up, pretty much the only logical move, and another pawn move. That makes no sense. So he really should have played knight to f3, and I just go right ahead with e5, going for the break. Now I'm threatening to rip open the whole position and open this e-file, or this e-file against his own king. He takes, but that allows me to break my own position free. Now I'm threatening something like knight to d3 check. And he brings even the wrong knight in because he has to control the d3 square. Now look at all these pieces. They're completely inactive, and mine are ready to break free. So I develop my last minor piece, and now I'm threatening again this check. He takes, and my bishops are fully developed, controlling all the important squares on white's queen side. All right, so he gets his rook out, but look at these pieces again. And now the king's stuck in the center, and white's going to have some problems. So I just start pushing this pawn. I really want to aggressively break open this position. Now he could take, which would be a bad decision. He could play knight to f3, but that's probably the best move, just logically too, hitting this bishop. But after bishop to e4, pinning it, he's going to have some problems as well. But instead we see this rook move, which I just attack it with the knight. The bishop takes, now I'm hitting this rook, and look at this crazy position. Why would a 2100 player ever get this position? I don't know. But it's not that he didn't know the opening, he didn't follow any basic strategy. It makes no sense to me why players play like this. And he probably knows what not to do, but maybe he's just having fun, I don't know. But I play d3, and now he's basically screwed. I'm threatening bishop to c3, pinning the rook. He tries to get his pieces out after a last gasp, but the real problem is that now I get this check, and I take all these pawns. Now the threat is for me to bring the rook in and keep this very dangerous passed pawn. Probably something like queen here, I think I saw that in the analysis, would have been best, but still, if I'm able to keep this pawn, White's going to have a lot of problems. So he takes, and then I win all these pawns, and I ended up just winning this game in a rook endgame. Well, we can just go through the moves real quick. Trade, and then I just basically consolidated, got my king out, and then he blundered some more pawns, and then I just kept pushing. And after a couple more moves with the pawns, I check, win the rook, and I just made it in pretty quickly. Alright, so why did this happen? This whole endgame was relatively inconsequential because the game was already lost by the time I won this huge 3-pawn majority over here. It was just finishing off the game, right? But it all stemmed from all these pawn moves, which made it easier to attack these pawns, and also at the same time didn't develop his pieces. So this is how players lose in the opening. It's not an opening line, it's understanding and analysis. So hopefully this video helped you understand a little more about what I'm talking about. I'm trying to clarify my ideas and get them out as clear as they are in my head. If you have any more questions, let me know. Hopefully I can keep making videos like this that will, further expound on these ideas, because I know when you first hear them, they're hard to implement. I get it. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.